and in the warm and loving energy of this ministry, Spiritual Life Center. If you are here with us for the first time tonight, we especially want to welcome you because we know that you are not here by accident. We are all here by divine appointment, and we're absolutely thrilled to see all of you here tonight. And I'd like to introduce Avenel, and she is our chaplain, and she's going to lead us in our opening prayer.
And I greet you in all the most beautiful love that I have within my heart. So I invite you, sacred SLC community, to join with me in this moment in time. I invite you to close your eyes if it works for you, and become aware of your breathing. Feel the flow in and out of your body. Feel your inner energy field, all that you ever have to deal with, cope with, is here in life, this very moment. We are so grateful to Catherine for her journey in bringing this program to us so that we can learn about vibration and energy and all that is. Thank you, God. And together we say, Amen. So it is.
Thank you. The chaplains have their healing circle after this program right next door, and it's really a nice thing to take that energy from here and go over and have an additional blessing. And if you are here for the first time tonight, you see one of our ushers in the back on the way out, and they can give you a card to fill out where you can find ways to we will connect with you, and then you can reconnect with us, if that makes any sense. This Friday is the Summer Splash with River Tribe, and the online advance tickets are available until midnight tonight. Or you can buy them from Elaine while she is still here. After that, the tickets are $40 at the door. And then there's also a raffle, and they are $50 for one ticket and three tickets for $100, which of course is the better deal. You don't have to be present to win, so you can come buy your ticket, and then if you need to leave, give it to someone, and they can win for you. It is the raffle is the big one, is 7 nights anywhere where there are World Mark accommodations. And I believe there's also $1,000 that goes with that to help you get where you're going. Only 45 tickets have been sold so far, so the odds are really good. So get your tickets. Next week, the wow is, well, me. Part 2 of Beyond Magical Thinking, and it is, what am I talking about? Illusion versus reality. And I always talk about things that have gotten sort of a bee in my bonnet and the way we use certain words, and I'd like to get people thinking about how we use those words differently. So next week, come and find out what I think illusion really is or isn't, and what I think reality is or isn't, which really might not make a lot of sense. But it's like, it is grounded in real teachings, though. So the program will start at 7, and of course we'll have salad at 6. And welcome to part 3. Catherine Mandela has been an environmental scientist and an environmental educator for over 25 years, and she's been a musician since birth. She comes from a long line of musicians and travelers and has always had the need to be in and understand nature. It was through her travels around the world that she saw the relationship and influences between music and communities, both cultural and natural. She is a multi-instrumentalist, and after being hired to present Instruments of the World programs, she couldn't help but include the natural element to the subject. She began calling it eco-musicology. Echoes, there's probably echoes in there too, right?
All part of the vibe.
This is the study of the interrelationships between music and the natural world. Though she thought of this over 20 years ago, she has learned that in the last decade or so, through collective consciousness, others have thought of the same thing, and now the subject can actually be found in Wikipedia, and it's even offered as a class at some universities. We welcome Catherine for an evening of exploring music through the natural and global places from which it was inspired, and why music is so important for the health and development of the natural world. Welcome to the Vibrating Earth.
So, are we vibing good tonight? So, I have this third talk to share about what the earth has to say, and not just the earth, but all of our surrounding neighbors around us. And I call this Vibrating Earth because I'm going to go through how much sounds, our flavors, and more than we probably even know yet. Now, some of you, I'm not sure, has anybody been to my previous talks yet? Most everybody. There's a few people who haven't, so I'm going to recap a little bit. So as Debbie was saying, I call this my ecomusicology program. And words, another thing in my past is I've learned different languages, and I also saw the relationship of languages and how they mean things subliminally, which help explain things. So for example, eco comes from the Greek word oikos, which means hearth or home. And music comes from the Greek word muses, which means of or from the animal's mouth. And then I thought, well, animals, a lot of people just think about animals and they don't think about a lot of other things, but we hear people, ancients, indigenous people talk about the rock people. And, well, ology, of course, means the study of. But to elaborate on animal comes from the Latin word anima. Anima means, does anybody speak Spanish or Italian or Portuguese out there? You'll recognize the word. It means soul or life. Well, basically it means soul or spirit, which is a derivative of life. And life actually means to have breath or a pulse. And a pulse is doing what? It's vibrating. So I'm going to get into these three topics right here. I'm going to talk about the Schumann resonance, sacred geometry, and solfeggio frequencies, and what they even have to do with vibration. So in this, trigger finger. Right here we've got Om, and everybody probably in this room has probably heard of Om, but did you know what it came from? Ancients knew this. You'll find it, in fact, the word Om came in early Hindu traditions. They used it as a chant because they understood it and knew that it was the frequency of all of nature. So everything is going to be resonating in 432 hertz. I will talk a little bit more about hertz in a minute because it's kind of a mathematical situation, but everything is connected, including math. In fact, math and science were later disciplines to help explain a lot of this stuff that we see in nature. Now, the interesting thing about system is that every one of our planets, and including our sun, has a specific frequency, including our Earth. And if you listen right here, and I actually have another tuning fork, and right here I might explain a little bit about what hertz are. Hertz are basically a way to describe a unit of frequency. So one hertz means it's going to have one wave per second. But if you've got 126 hertz, there's going to be 126 waves that we'll be able to create within a second. And so 126 hertz is going to sound like this, which is our sun, the frequency of our sun. Now that's kind of hard to hear, but I also, because not all of us have the same hearing frequencies, and that is why I brought this as well. It sounds like have you ever used a tuning fork before? Can anybody not pick that up? Is there somebody having a hard time picking that up? Let me see if I can. Oops, sorry about that. Maybe you got that for sure. Does that come out? So that if you, and it's actually not, it didn't have all the static in the atmosphere, we'd be able to hear that. And in some cases with microphones we can. I always love putting these to my head because then you really hear it. But anyway, where's my thing? And you'll probably, you've heard different tones for different chakras and stuff, which we'll talk about later, and especially next month in our human section of this series. But the Schumann resonance has to do with basically the Earth's heartbeat. And the resonance is happening in between basically the surface of the Earth and our outermost layer, which is known as the ionosphere, that is basically that last layer before space. It's what's protecting us from all the radiation and things coming in from outside of the Earth. And that resonance is at 7.81 or so hertz. Now, that's what it generally is at. Now, that frequency is way too low for us to hear. However, animals hear it, and plants hear it, and a lot of other things hear it. That's why, have you ever seen videos of a dog freaking out just before an earthquake? I have a friend in Chile that he has horses and goats, and he said that big earthquake they had about 8 years ago, he said his horses for like 10 days were freaking out just before that earthquake happened. And another interesting thing, too, is I had this place I lived in Carmichael for a while. I called it the Bayou in front of my house. It turned out to be a septic leak. The landlord wouldn't admit that it was on our side of the property. He kept trying to blame the neighbor. But anyway, especially in the springtime, I would notice insects, these gnats flying over my lawn, and it was about an area this big, and they were all flying like this, and then they changed direction. And they go like this, and then they change direction and go. And I remember just like staring at them, going, what are they hearing or knowing to know all synchronistically to do that? And that's because there was some vibration below our hearing level that they were picking up on. In fact, I saw some pretty, you can even get these apps now on your phone to have this low frequency to keep mosquitoes away from you. Yeah. Now, interesting though, with the Schumann resonance, the Schumann resonance is something that affects all of us. And as I said, it's in between, it's basically that, 30 to 50 or so miles between the surface and the ionosphere. And lately, they've actually been detecting, and even over the last 30 years, kind of since the harmonic convergence, kind of like the 60s on to now, it's been spiking. And I've read recently that it spiked as high as 50 hertz per second, 50 hertz, which is quite high. That's a very high frequency, and they're finding that as of late, that the frequency of the Earth is actually increasing. And a lot of us we're all feeling this. You may not realize it or not, but some of these weird things that we're all having happen to our bodies are in direct relationship to this. And time is definitely speeding up. Yes, I think we can all agree on that one. Now, I wanted to bring up sacred geometry, especially as a musician, I've definitely felt whether the geometry in the place I was playing was sacred or not. So to explain sacred geometry, if you just take the word, you break it down linguistically, geo means earth, metry means to measure, so that's measuring the earth, measuring things, and sacred means from God. So God is what? It's creation, it's source. And the geometry, which is also very explainable in mathematical equations, which it's, I don't know if you all can read that below there, it's Fibonacci numbers. Has anybody ever heard of the Fibonacci numbers? We'll get a little bit more into that in a sec, but this building, this temple right here, it's called the Dandra Temple, and it's in Egypt. And a friend of mine who actually was going to be here today, he's not here yet, but he shared this with me, and he remembers when he was a boy, when he was still living in Egypt, it was a field trip his class went to, where they were taught that when the sun hit this temple at the right angle, it would whistle. So sacred geometry has a lot of things to be lined up to keep its sacredness. Now, as a musician, I can tell you experiences I've had. For example, this last Christmas, I was a musician in a performance of a Celtic Christmas festival, and we had 3 different performances in 3 different places. 3 of them were in churches. 1 of them was at a theater. The theater and 2 of these churches went really well. Everybody sounded really good. And then there was one particular building that was a church, but it was strange. It had an architecture. It was kind of a nouveau architecture. I think it was more to be visually trippy rather than thinking of sacred geometry, because nobody could hit their high notes. I pulled my bagpipes out. I even had a hard time getting the bag full of air. I couldn't even get the bag full of air enough. I couldn't hit the high notes. I noticed the virtuoso violinist couldn't hit her high notes. They're all, and then the poor soprano soloist she couldn't get her high notes either. And I looked up, and the ceiling were these 2 big beams that cut right through the middle of it. And I'm thinking, that is just the most unsacred geometry for a place like this. So anyway, that's an example of how sacred geometry can work and where things can be harmonious and synchronistic. Because does anybody play an instrument or sing, even, do you ever go somewhere or whistle? Like, you can have days where you can whistle really good and other days it just won't come out. The geometry isn't very sacred, I guess, in that space. So right here, I have examples of there's 7 main modes of the Western scales. Of course, there's many different scales depending on where you're at in the world. But with sacred geometry, they actually are. In fact, are there any architects in the class? Kind of a class in the audience. What I found interesting was, I knew these modes, these scales, like Mixolydian scale, the Dorian scale, the Locrian scale. I've heard of them musically, but I didn't know it was an architectural form until, I had gone to Europe and studied some of the architecture there. And they are synchronistic. For example, the bottom picture, that's Paestum. That's a temple in Sicily. And that is of the Dorian architecture. So in that Dorian scale, and you don't really need to understand music to understand that, mathematically, they are of the same sequence. So the way that the columns are built are going to be the same increments numerically as the scale in a Dorian musical setting. And the one on the right is of the Locrian, that's a Locrian pillar, a design that you would find in like ancient Greece, and Rome has it as well. These are just 2 examples. There are others. Now, back to the Fibonacci numbers. We've probably all seen the Nautilus and all know the Da Vinci, the man, in the circle, and everything's divisible by pi, and they all have some kind of sequence and pattern to it. And nature pretty much does. And, it's when we see things that have been altered through synthetic means or a deformity from who knows what was going on at the time, whatever it was developing. Have you ever seen a person with really long arms and they just kind of stand out visually? Who knows? Maybe they had polio or some circumstance led them to be, not something that's typical in nature. Because nature has everything. even atypical situations that can't be explained by everything that we know. And you'll see Fibonacci sequences everywhere. You've got hurricanes, galaxies, seashells, flowers, turtle shells. You'll see it even if you got a microscope and looked at our cells, our organs, our skin, it's the same thing. So, whoa. Now, this thing, it's called it's a weird word, the Chandra plate. And what this does is, I'm going to go ahead and play this. It's a video, and you'll see what happens. As different frequencies hit it, it's going to affect the shape of the sand put on top of it. So for those of you with hearing aids, you might want to turn them down. It won't go much past this. Okay, that's good enough. Woo! Now, those where the sand went to was where the vibration wasn't happening. So ultimately, all this mathematical equations that we see in these designs in nature, its base, its foundation was in its vibration. Its vibration is what formed it. So there's all kinds of rhythms out there and cycles, and I wanted to bring up the circadian rhythms. And we feel these rhythms more than we even realize, and they have affected us right even to the type of music we play. Now, you've heard different scales and notes and pitches, but there's also rhythms. I'll give an example of rhythms. We have, I'll just use this djembe right here, but as you go around the world, and I had mentioned this for those of you who remember in the first talk, how our natural environment affects our culture and our sound and our music, even our food. But for example, you can have a rhythm like this. That could be one rhythm, but then you can go somewhere else and it'll sound like. Or you can hear. Now, all those rhythms, we can have as many of those and much more, even just within the day. Circadian rhythm. Circadian, if you break that word down, circa means, to go around a cycle. And dian, or dia, how much of it think of your Spanish a little bit, even if you know, means day. So it has to do with the rhythms that go within a day. And obviously, in our day, it's the sun that's driving that. So this is going to be hard for you to see. At least you know circadian. You can mentally jot that note down. But it's quite fascinating if you can't read it up close. I'll try it. Well, I can't quite remember everything. But for example, we'll start at midnight. A lot of things are shut down in our bodies. However, we've by earlier around like 8 o'clock that evening, melatonin secretions start activating in our bodies and getting us ready for sleep. And then as we get closer to the morning, around 7:30, melatonin stops. And then, there's certain parts of the day where, in fact, if you want to read them that are up close that can see a little better, I can't see that one from back there. But I know, for example, well, let's take 8:30 in the morning. I always knew there was a reason why we shouldn't start school and work at 8:30, because that's when a bowel movement is supposed to happen. And then you continue on into the day, and your in fact, the highest testosterone secretions around 9 in the morning. And then you go later into the day, you're most alert around 1:30, and then you're most coordinated around 2:30, and there's some around 3:30 and 4:30, you have the best cardiovascular, the highest blood pressure, and so like at 4:30, the greatest cardiovascular efficiency and muscle strength. And that might be a time you want to think about working out and doing your exercises. Whereas I've heard it's not so much here. I read somewhere that most babies are human. Well, I don't know about the animal kingdom, the rest of it, but most human babies are born around 4 o'clock in the afternoon. I know I wasn't, but I've never really fit into most categories. But anyway, and then 10:30, the bowel movements stop in your body. So have you ever met somebody that worked graveyard shift? And what were they like personality-wise? Generally a zombie, right? Everyone I know that works graveyard shift is they're not themselves. They look like a zombie to me. And I knew this one person. I've known this one person for probably about 25 years. In that period of time, only 2 of those did he actually have a normal, like 8 to 5 kind of work schedule, and he was a completely different person. But he's gone back to the graveyard shift, and he's back to that zombie mode. He doesn't look good, and that is because it's not biologically. We're not biologically fit for that type of lifestyle. Now there are animals out there, nocturnal animals, that are designed for that. We need everything to cover all the bases. So. Right here, I wanted to explain this place, the lithophones of Gabustan. Litho, that word has to do with rock, has to do with geology, and of course phones is something that's going to resonate. And Gabustan is actually a national park in Azerbaijan, and there are a lot of stones out there that make really great instruments, and some of them you don't even. Whoa. What is cricket? What is cricket medicine? In your backyard? Well, it was all time. The cricket has something to tell me. Yeah, could you please? Here, some of that moves faster. That'd be great. Thank you. So wordy. Went in my mouth. What was that in my mouth? You got it? Thank you. So, yeah. So, anyway, I should play the cricket song. I hear the cricket, yeah.
I just looked it up because one was in my backyard.
What's the cricket medicine?
Leaps of transformation.
So this is the perfect, we are actually all transforming. We did. It just landed right on me. Because we are all transforming right now, and vibrations will help us do that. That's why, I have saw this correlation of this musical bridge between humanity and the natural world. So back to Gabustan. Gabustan, as I said, is a national park in thank you, in Azerbaijan. And check this out. These petroglyphs are quite ancient too. So this ancient knowledge has been around. Now we probably want to, go check out Azerbaijan and see what's going on there now. So anyway, what I'm going to spend the rest of this evening with is I've brought lots of goodies with me to share with you. And a lot of them have things to say. And I had talked about the solfeggio frequencies and the different frequencies of the earth. And I brought with me a flute. This is an example. When I had learned about solfeggio frequencies. I learned that they actually were figured out, they were kind of formed into chants by Gregorian monks around 10,000 AD. And they originally were to specific frequencies. A lot of times they were at the earth frequency, which is 432 hertz. So if I was to play, a note, I would have to, if it was going to resonate with the earth, it would be at 432 hertz. And I can give you an example. This Tibetan bowl, if you go off the frequency, you're going to hear dissonance. And this is what it's going to sound like. So if I'm in sync with the frequency of this bowl, like right now, you don't hear any. You hear all the pure sounds, right? But if I go too fast, listen to this. Hear that when it goes ring, ring? It's because I'm going too fast and my waves are going too fast, faster than the waves of this particular frequency. So you see how when we are going against the waves of nature, it's going to frazzle us and make us dissonant. So that's when, and you're finding a lot more, it's not anything new. It's been going on for thousands of years. That's why Tibetan bowls are here. But their music is a perfect example of healing ourselves through sound, because life began with sound. So it makes sense. And Tibetan bowls, for example, what's kind of amazing about them, and that the ancients knew these things, is they're an alloy of mostly 5 different metals. So I'm going to play this earth one right here. So it's a bronze alloy, so it's going to be made up of like gold, silver, zinc, copper, what else is out there? Nickel. But you can hear in the vibrations, if you listen, this one does a good job. Let me bring this one up again. If you listen, you can hear the higher tones, the middle tones, and the lower tones, now that you know what to listen for. You're just picking up on 2. You might be picking on more than 2. And it doesn't surprise me that the people of that part of the world, like, have you ever heard of Tuvan throat singers? No. They can actually do that with their voice. So I wouldn't even, it's kind of an unfathomable thing for me at this point, but maybe another life as a Tuvan, I might be able to do that. But the really sweet bowls, and I've heard them. I tried to get my other sister to bring hers over here tonight. She couldn't make it because she's got some. They've got tektite. You know what tektite is? Excuse me. Tektite is sky iron or meteorite, and I actually have one right here. This is a meteorite. And they actually would go out and find these and smelt them down and mix them into their bowl, and they would make some pretty sweet sounds. And those are real sacred bowls. You don't see them around much. A lot of them have been very coveted and cared for. Some of them made it out into the mainstream, but that is an example of that how nature has helped and how humans. And you wonder, how did we lose all this knowledge? Like, there's so much information. We've been around, and you'll hear a lot of people talk about it. You hear Greg Braden and others talk about this a lot, but it's actually scientifically proven that humans, we've been around in our modern anatomical form for at least 200,000 years. That's a long time, and we really only know, a version of the last 5,000 years of history. And we're finding out a lot of that is, been altered as well. So there's a lot of information out there. These tuning forks I have right here, they're also an example, where people have, they're tuned to each chakra, which that'll be something I'm going to get into next month when I'm talking about the human connection to all this musical and ecological stuff. But for example, this would be the tone for the sacral. Does it come out in that one, Sasha?
I'm wondering, what if you touch the base of it to the stem of the microphone?
kind of. Now this is the throat chakra. Now this is actually vibrating 141 hertz. Do you hear that? I'll do one more. How's that? We can have time to do some more as well. Here would be the heart chakra. Well, the good thing is that I've got a bowl that can do that. Now, the heart chakra would be, what, the hertz? It's at 136 hertz. Now, I was talking about how the solfeggio frequencies were used for healing by the Gregorian monks. Well, interestingly, back then, there was some different tunings that would be like around, 432 hertz or sometimes 444 hertz. And you'll see the number 12, different numbers and sequences show up a lot. You'll see a lot of 9s, a lot of 12s in nature, a lot of 5s too. That's why we've got 5 fingers and toes. But interestingly, around the 1600s, they changed the standard tuning to 440. So most of us musicians today, when we go out and we get in our band or orchestra or whatever, we tune to 440. And I have an example. It's very subtle, but what I've learned is that, the monks originally, the Gregorian monks and the Gregorian chants that you've heard, and you can still get some of the traditional tuning, they were designed to do different healing aspects. And I will, that's what skipped over here for some reason. I want to go back to the different notes. Sasha, can you help me with this, please? It skipped. Okay, there we go. I need to go backwards. There. It skipped right here. But these solfeggio frequencies right here, the original were 6. But if you went to a scale of today and you look at the piano or some other instrument, we think of octaves. So you got do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do, or si, do if you're in Europe. But the original ones were actually only 6, the 6 main ones. And the first one was not do, it was actually oot. Now, oot that frequency is helping with liberating guilt and fear. And re, which I have this one right here, and also, we can't do this right now until later. This is a Tibetan water dancing bowl. And I will show that to you in a minute. This one, I believe, this bowl is also at 417 hertz. So if you want a good sound, a good tone to help with the facilitating change. Now, I have a friend that's actually put water in one of these, and if he got it in its sweet spot, he could get the water to come up in this little pillar, and it went up to about like this high. It's kind of hard in this situation. I got too much going on. But the me, and this is a great one right here, and I'm going to talk more about this next month, but the me is the center note. When you're a little kid and you go to your first piano lesson, the teacher will go, "Where's middle C?" And you'll go, "Right there." And that actually is the me tone, and it's generally in the middle of the note of the scale of most instruments. And it is where the transformation and miracles happen. This is where DNA can be repaired. And a lot of chants would use the me scale to help with these processes. And then the fa is at 639 hertz. That's where connecting with your community and your family and getting your relationships with people and things and your relationship with the natural world and whatever sorted out. And then soul, this is another one that I found interesting because I just made a revelation. I've had this theory with my water dancing bowl from Tibet. I've also come across in my research that it's a Chinese wash basin. And I'm like, oh, that's so unsexy. Chinese wash basin. But, think about it. You don't want dirty water, and if you're washing, you want to clean that. But if you're in a place where there's lots of people, how are you going to get good, clean water? Well, frequencies can clean that. And I tested this, and lo and behold, it is at 741 frequencies, which is awakening to intuition and cleansing. So, and we'll get to experience this towards the end. But the last, well, it's not the last frequency that has healing properties, but this one is returning to spiritual order. That's the law on the scale. And you'll hear, I want to give you an example of, it's very subtle, but when they changed the tuning to 440, it threw the frequencies off. So in this scale, you'll have the God frequency, which is me, and then the last one it's actually the devil's frequency. But that doesn't mean that's good or bad. It just means it's the opposite. In nature, there's night and day, black, white, dark, light. That balance. There's always a balance. But it basically. And if you ask young people today, what kind of music they listen to, and if you travel around the world, all the music today sounds the same. A lot of music I play is traditional music from all over the world, and I find it really kind of sad. Everywhere you go around the world, the older people are like, they don't know their traditions. They're losing their traditions. And it's also a form of dumbing down. That these frequencies, the beat is always dum, 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 it's nothing spurring the creative part of the brain to flourish. And so, there's arguments. It's not saying that all music in 440 is going to do that. There's a lot of beautiful music everywhere. But in general, it's being homogenized. A lot of it is just losing all the different frequencies and aspects to make one whole. So I'm going to play these two flutes. One is in the earth frequency. Do you remember what that is? 432 hertz. Where I have another one that's actually in a different frequency. It's in 444. See if you can tell the difference. Do they sound different? You definitely can hear the difference when you're out there, where you can really hear the difference. So this is the flute tuned to the earth frequency. It's the 432 hertz. Typically what we tune to today is 440. And, you'll see choirs or, bands, they'll have a little tuner out there, and the conductor will go, I'm going to play them right next to each other, and you'll see if you can tell the difference. You can see if you can tell if they sound in tune or not. Whoops, really, let me get the right notes corresponding. I have to really blow harder to get that higher pitch out of this one to be able to match, the 440 tuning. So those little subtle changes, and things have worked that way to be able to control people, control things. You do it subtly. They don't even, kind of like the frog in the boiling water concept. I'm going to finish up in a minute, and then I'm going to leave some room for questions, Q&A. But I want to let the rock sing now. Now, some of you have been to my earlier ones with the MIDI sprout, the MIDI meaning musical interface device. It's my little fun new toy that I've just been having such fun with. This is what it looks like. It's not, that extravagant, which is cool. It's very, camouflaged. And I brought some rocks with me, and so did many other people that are very curious. I'm going to start with this one right here. This is, you don't see it very well, but later you can come up and look at it. It's a fossilized dolphin ear bone from Kern County. Kern County used to be, for those of you who are not familiar with California, Kern County is like Fresno-ish area. That used to be seafloor at one point. This is what it's going to sound like. Well, I don't know what it's going to sound like. It's going to let us know. I've tried different things. They don't always want to sing. But I've had some pretty interesting experiences with different ones. While I'm setting this up, I'll tell you a story. My sister had been given a goldenrod crystal as a gift. When it was just on the table, it wouldn't play. When it was in my hands, it wouldn't play. But when she held it, it would sing. And there was some other ones, too, where if you held it in your left hand, it would sing, but not in your right, or vice versa, because different rocks, different elements are polarized. Just like in the minerals, like, gold, particularly monoatomic gold, is the most purest 100% currents. Get it out, Catherine. There's no, it can transfer energy completely, 100%. So right here is what this is going to sound like. This is the dolphin ear bone singing. Now, to explain a little bit about what's going on is that rocks and many things, they have vibrations. This device is just sensing that vibration and translating that particular vibration to a musical note. So that's what you're hearing. When I have this rock at home, this fossil, it's a lot more chatty than this. Just like the plants, they're attached to their people. Are you able to hear it okay? So thank you, Dolphin Earbone. We're going to try this piece of amethyst and see what this amethyst has to say. I feel like a medic when I'm doing this. This weekend I was in Yosemite, and I took this with me, and I was out in the river, and there was a rock exposed in the river. I was curious about a rock in the water. And I noticed that the rock, there was clouds, and when the sun was covered by clouds, it was a little more subdued, and then as soon as the sun full blast hit the rock, it got more active. And then the cloud would come back and it would calm down again, and it kept going on and on. I should have videoed it, but I couldn't use my phone and my video at the same time. Well, thank you, Amethyst. Shall we? I'm gonna try this one right here. This is a crystal from somebody brought this one. You brought this one, right? Your name is Jeannie. So this is a crystal. Jeannie does crystal healings, and I brought all kinds of things. I have one of my favorite ones is the fossilized turtle poop. It's actually one of the prettiest ones too, that bright glossy red one with some white and grays. Now, this may or may not sing. We'll see what happens. Now, this is your crystal. Did you find it, or you just knew it came from there? Now, I'm going to try well, actually, why don't you come around and you hold it? Now, make sure not to touch the probes, just the crystal itself. Rocks can be shy, too. And they don't always start right away, I find. No, yeah, you can pick it up, yeah. Maybe it doesn't want to. I've had them talk, and then I've had them not.
It doesn't want to perform right now.
It's very possible. It doesn't want to give us energy here. We can try. We can try this one right here. Well, oops. Yeah, I've had some sing before, and then other times not. Now, this one, it's hard to say why. This may not be the right vibrations here for it. That's me. That's me right there. But what I'll do, what I always love doing, I love river rock. And I have a friend who's part Wintu. If you don't know who the Wintu are the native Californians of like kind of up the valley. Oops, hold on, let me fix this here. It's resonating. I don't know if this is going to be. This might be too heavy. Now, this rock, and I feel so bad because I've kicked it numerous times, it's what holds this door open. It's our door rock.
It's our door stopper.
It's time to really meet this rock. It has.
It performs a very important service.
It does. It really does. So now we can all say hi to this rock every time we go by. In fact, I say hi to all the rocks now. Now I see the color, I see that it's responding, and then it just went off. It's very low, yeah, and it could be, who knows what it could be, and if we took this out in the sun, it would probably charge up, yeah, and wake up. Well, I've tested this rock before, and it sang a lot. Yeah, let's try, I have a piece of selenite, and I also have a piece of, let's try the fossilized turtle poop. Coprolite, yeah. Who knows? No? Well, it had ate a lot of musical fruit, apparently. It's usually quite vocal. Not an adjective you usually associate with poop, but it is very... Usually when you see red in rocks, it's got iron. It's reaction with iron. So I'm going to do this one right here. Thank you. Turtle poop. Copper's green, yeah. Now, I had an interesting thing with selenite. This piece I have right here is actually selenite, which I've learned is from the angelic realms, and I had hooked it up to the MIDI sprout, and it was really, the color that it was doing on the sensor was all white, and it was really high and jingly. And I said something that was like, kind of like, oh, maybe I should do that, and I can make a profit off that. Just thinking, oh, that'd be cool. And he goes, like that, real low. And I've never heard it make that sound ever, or any other thing make that kind of sound. And the color was all red. So I was like, okay, I won't do it. Let's see. Interesting. Not a lot of chatty rocks with us today. Now, it could be, it takes a minute. I've had that piece of selenite be immediately vibrating heavily, and then other times nothing I could pick up anyway. Let's try this piece of rose quartz. This one's heavy. Put it right here. Gonna stand up. And a lot of these rocks here have actually been sitting inside. So maybe, a lot of people that have used rocks for healing and stuff, a lot of people have learned that having them in the sun or on a full moon will charge them. This one's been sitting inside, right? Yeah. Interesting. Well, I'm going to try one more, and then we can wrap it up. I'm going to finish it off. This is a fossilized whale ear bone. There's still lots we have to learn from the rock people. Now, size does not make a difference. Thought waves are actually physical things. You know, when that old adage, "Sticks and stones will break my bones," that was the worst thing you could teach a kid, because it's not true. Sticks and stones, you know, words can hurt, thoughts can hurt, just like thoughts can heal. And apparently, this ear bone heard that and likes that message. I found that people that, I've put it on some friends' rings. I generally don't wear rings too often from playing instruments, but stones that they wear a lot with them. The 3 different people, I would hear, you would hear like a heartbeat with the stones that they're always on their person. And so stones, okay. Is this one you wear a lot? Shock. Thank you. So this is a labradorite ring. So while I set this up, well, let's do this real quick. And then we can do a little demo of this Tibetan water dancing bowl afterwards, while we do some questions. Yeah. So, let's see what might happen here. Sorry for you out in TV land. It's kind of the boring part. You don't see what's going on as much, but setting up some labradorite. Yeah, this one. Channeling through her phone. So this one, this one's kind of hard to pick up because the stone is so flat in there. But what I'd like to do before we finish up, I've got some others, but I'd like to leave some time for questions. Does anybody have any questions? We have a microphone that we want to make sure everybody can talk through, so everybody gets to enjoy.
Is it on, Sasha? I actually have a question.
Sure, since you have it.
You know, you can go on iTunes and you can buy all of these different soundtracks that play all of these different vibrational or frequencies.
Yes.
And you can get one that does.
There's a free, yeah.
But you can get one that's the Schumann frequency.
You can get the Schumann frequency. There's even a free app that has all the solfeggio frequencies.
So what does it do for you to sit and listen to those?
It will help stimulate different things. Like I had read on that one slide of depending on what you want to focus on, like cleansing or, activating your pineal gland at 819 hertz, or, you have relationships that you would like to mend, or, community. You want to connect with your community more, you can listen to that tone and help develop the energy that you need to be able to do that, and so on and so forth. I'll hold on. She's got her mic. I'm going to let her ask, and then you ask that so everybody can hear that, because more people would like to hear. So go ahead.
I'm not on.
Mic on? Oh, there we go.
Is it on?
Yeah.
Okay. When they changed the tuning frequencies to 440, what was the music that was produced before that on the old frequencies? Was that the Mozart and the Vivaldis and the medieval music and all of that kind of stuff? Was Mozart then? When did it change?
It's not black and white. There were many different frequencies, but Paula here was
Oh,
so
Paula's the
answer that
expert.
question.
I do. I've done a little research on this one. So basically, there was a moment when the church actually decided to separate what was sacred music from what was secular music. And that was the beginning of and that began a war of frequencies for standard tuning. So it moved away from, so 432 was in line with all of the natural frequencies, and that was the church music. And then you had the sacred or the secular music, and that began to be tuned at 440 and all the way up to 444. So, who were the musicians? Well, I can tell you one thing that I know, and you may have heard about this, but in Bach's time, so the well-tempered clavier, you've heard of that? It was not until, it was around the time of Bach when, prior to Bach, there was every scale, the relationship of each note to the next note in a scale. In each scale, it was a different relationship. And then they wanted to make them all regulated so that the steps in the scale, in every key, were the same, so that you could transpose from one key to the other key. That's why the beauty of the Indian music, if you saw Dr. Gaitanda and she was singing in different rags, every rag still has different relationships. And that's why they sound a little strange to us too, because they're not what we're used to. So it was kind of a war between the church and state.
For example, the blues scale, there's always that one dissonant note. That was it was the devil's note, but really, in actuality, it was the God's note. It was the God's frequency. So anyway, there's so much history about all this that we can go on and on about. But yeah, we had. Yeah. Okay. There's the mic. Oh.
Me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah. So your question.
yeah.
Turn, Jen.
Thank you. We're doing the dolphin's ear,
Yeah. Earbone.
earbone. When we're hearing these music frequencies, do they hear that in their head because they are so vocal?
Well, animals hear things far beyond what we can hear. And I had talked about that before. I mean, especially marine mammals, because they're in that aquatic environment, sound travels 4 times faster in water than it does in air. So they've got the sonic abilities as well. There's actually, people actually have this ability too. Remember, I don't know, remember if you remember that boy who was from Elk Grove. He was on Oprah a lot, and he had a pituitary cancer around his pituitary gland, so he was blind. But he taught himself he could ride a bike, rollerblade, because he could tell you that's wood, that's glass. He could tell you what it was. And a boy whose mom was a scientist studying this stuff taught himself how to do that, and he was a sighted person. So we all have this ability. There's so much in our brain we haven't, if like a muscle, you don't use it, it's going to turn to mush. We've got a lot of mush in our brains. We've got lots to beef up. Who's the next question?
Yeah, I have a question. Where can I buy those probes so I can do it myself?
Online.
Online?
You can go online. Yeah, it's called MIDI Sprout.
Mini Sprout?
Yeah.
M-
MIDISPROUT.
Okay.
Sure.
Isn't the 528 hertz also the love vibration?
It's the love frequency, the God frequency, the DNA repair frequency. Yes.
That's what
the
I
center. It's the heart chakra. The color associated with it is green. That's why you go out in nature and feel so good when you go walk through the forest, because it's just healing is all around you.
So
See.
So also then the higher you go, are you talking more into the heavenly realm of things?
Yeah.
And then the 440 goes further into the lower vibrations, the lower tone?
Yes and no.
Okay.
It all depends. It means how many cycles per second, how many waves that sound can make in a second, within a second. That's how it's being measured, and the measurement is called hertz. There's other ones like decibels and other things too, but we're talking about hertz. The question here? You've got the mic. Oh. Anybody have another question? Here we've got. Oh.
Kind of tying on with what she said. So I'm not going to research this, but if I wanted to get a meditation recording in the 432 tuning, what would you recommend?
You can go online and find a plethora of it. It's just go and see what resonates with you. There's a lot of it online.
432, there's tons of it out 432.
And you can get instruments, you can get tuning forks, you can get bowls in that. Yeah. Yeah. We had a question over here with the blue shirt.
If we were to get the MIDI sprout, how do you get the sound? Are you playing it through a laptop or?
Yeah, well, you can download a free app, so you'll need an iPad, a smart, a pad or a smartphone. I've got it on my phone too. So you can be out, you can travel and have this little thing like this. When you travel, bring it and go listen to a tree. I was in Yosemite this week doing that.
But what's the name of the the free app? What's
It'll show you, the company will say,
you go to MIDI Sprout and
there.
it will be in
Look at it right now, you'll see it on.
MIDIsprout.com. Yeah.
So we need to wrap it up here because people need to go home. So thank you. And next, we've got a final one. And I'm going to, for those of you who want to see this, I'm going to do the Tibetan water dancing bowl. And the way this works is, first of all, I need clean hands because. Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry.
I was going to suggest, what if you did that during the offering? We can bless the offering, and then you can do that. Okay.
Sounds good.
That'll be our offering music. Okay, so first of all, thank you, Catherine. I found some glasses were found on the ground. If somebody's lost, they look like reading glasses. No. Okay, so what a wonderful, wonderful program, and we get one more night next month with Catherine. So as we give and keep things in circulation and share with each other, this is a time to do that as well. And so let us say together our offering blessing. Divine love, as me, blesses and multiplies all that I am, all that I have, and all that I circulate. Thank you, God.
Now, you won't see this there, but if you want to come up and look, you can see the water dances. And these vibrations are part of what's is my theory, and I believe it will hold true, that it is cleansing the water. And the frequency that it's vibrating at is the soul frequency. It would be so, like do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. That's the note E on the keyboard on the Western scale. Okay, it's sliding. It's kind of similar to Rudolf Steiner's development of that fountain that moves in infinity. And when water, there's actually one of these fountains over at the Steiner College off of Fair Oaks Boulevard in Carmichael. They'll pour dirty water into the top. By the time it gets down to the bottom, it's been cleansed. It's clean. Sometimes I can get to go really. Yeah. Well, it's like Tibetan bowls. It's a bronze alloy. So, and this one, it's patinaed, so it's definitely got copper in it. Copper is also a very powerful, very conductive. That was the word I was looking for earlier. But let me try to get it to sing. Kind of like if you were to hit E on a keyboard, the soul. Come on, I lost it. It's hard to get it to sing. There we go. Hear it? Now you're hearing just one of the pitches. I mean, there's other tones in there. Sometimes you can get it low. I don't know if there's 4 or 5 different metals made into this bronze, but basically it's that low, the low vibration that's going to get the water to dance to purify. And if you took pictures of this, remember that the Chandra plate that had the sand on it? This is basically doing the same thing in the water.
Is it heating up when it bubbles like that?
No. It's just vibration.